Hello, welcome to another WeAreDevelopers Live. It's Wednesday again. We're actually here at home, snowed in, so there's nothing else we could do but just have some fun together here today. Dan, how's life on the island? Family's back,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, family's back, so the house is a little bit noisier. But they do me the favor. They go out quite often whenever we have this live show because it's the one disadvantage you have, right, over not working in an office, or rather, when you're working in an office, you can only control so much of the noise because there's people who live here. But yeah, it's all right. We're well and truly in January, and it feels that way now. Christmas feels a long way away now. So yeah,
Yeah.
2026 is on the go.
Yeah, we keep making the same mistake with filling in forms and stuff that we just put in 2025 and then crunching it out again. And like it's bizarre how that one thing makes a difference. But it's easier to find like links and stuff because now I can search for 2026 in my URL bar and basically like not find the old
Mm.
stuff anymore. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, it does
So
feel weird
today
though.
it does feel weird, but then like it also feels weird that like when you take a look at like what is it like the Rage Against the Machine album is 35 years old, 36 years old
Oh,
now. That's
don't do
just
this
like
to me.
this should not be a thing. Like
No.
it's just like we're like, yay, that's when you talk about 30-year-old music, you think ABBA. You're not
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
this kind of stuff.
I
Like,
did hear that, because it's a bit like that whole thing of a bit like computers, really, isn't it? 1st of January 1970. I grew up thinking 30 years to the year 2000, and you could kind of do the maths like that. And now it sort of
yeah.
doesn't make sense that you're like, I don't feel old enough for it to be, this far into the 2020s. It feels like we're living in the future. 2026 feels too far. We need to stop, slow down.
Well, I mean, maybe we will. We'll see. I just have to do a run here to create the web page because I realized something isn't working. But let's do that in the background and see what GitHub Pages is doing to us while we're doing that. It's
Yeah.
actually, I mean, I love GitHub Pages for being able to host things, and it's now good that you can see the actions running and that it's building because when it came out, it was like 10 minutes of waiting and you didn't know what was going on.
Mm.
I'm looking at Codeberg right now as well for hosting, and there it's not as insightful, but it's going to be interesting to see how this became a thing. That like back in the days, you just FTP things over,
Yeah.
reloaded, shift reloaded, and you were done. But now it's always just building and waiting for things. Now,
Mm.
talking about old technologies and web stuff, our guest today is a friend of mine who I've known for ages that actually works in the web development space or in the front end development space, but he's also a freelancer. So he was complaining on LinkedIn a few days ago that it's really hard to actually do something as a freelancer right now, which kind of turned around right now. But let's get him on stage and get him introduced. So, Anselm Hannemann, how are you doing?
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm doing good. Yeah, thanks. How are you?
So you've been saying that like it's trickier right now to get new work in as a contractor or as a freelancer because of the market right now. Like, what made you actually choose to be a freelancer? Then were you never tempted to just go and sit in an office somewhere?
Actually, no. I've been a freelancer since 16 years now. I never was employed in my life, actually. um, I went to school. I learned web development myself, taught it myself. I coded some websites for friends, then for some clients. It got bigger and bigger. It scaled up, and I built my business, and I never stopped doing that. So that's
Okay.
how it went in the past. And with my network in the past, I never had any issues finding jobs. It was like, hey, please ask next year again because I'm fully booked already. And it was always working that my network of people and company people just networked. So whenever any job was to be done, we asked each other to help each other. And this was really, really great. And things shifted in the past years. I think it started when COVID was a thing, when everyone went at home, when conferences stopped being a thing. I mean, in-person conferences here. And what I realized over the past years is a shift of mentality. So as freelancers, are not known to many people in companies anymore, that this is an option to hire a freelancer, an external person, to do internal work. to do the stuff that you're internally not organizing, or you have too less resources or stuff like that. And also in parallel, a lot of my people from the network, they got hired. They are not freelancers anymore. So there is a slight shift towards employment. And nowadays it's much harder for me to find projects, as a freelancer. As a context, I'm doing front-end work here. It may be different for people in front-end. It is certainly different for other areas or other jobs. Yeah, that's context for me.
Yeah, often it feels like also that you get a freelancer in if you have something limited to do, like, okay, we need to build a website for the Congress that we have, and nobody internally wants to do it. Like, let's get a third party rather than like the marketing department having to find an engineer in the company. You get an outside contractor, you pay them, and actually make the thing. And that's when it gets really frustrating when, as a web developer inside a company, you look at the marketing materials that somebody created, and it's absolutely atrocious and inaccessible, and you're like, oh God, why didn't we do that? But it feels like a lot of times that freelancers get in when the house is already on fire. Do you feel like that as well? That you're actually often there to be the person with the fire extinguisher to sort things out?
Yeah, what you say here, I can relate a lot to. That's also what I meant with people don't really know how to deal with a freelancer or why to hire a freelancer. They often think like I can externalize a certain task. It needs to be specified. It's work up front. It's work afterwards because it's not fitting into our code, for example. Whereas how I do freelancing is actually going into the teams, working with the teams, and extending it. So I'm part of the team. I'm part of all the internal stuff that is happening, meetings, conception, organization, and stuff like that. And this sometimes is very weird in the beginning, but it feels great afterwards for the team, for the managers, and for myself. And that way that I'm fully integrated, I can do a lot more things than anyone can imagine because I have external view, but I'm internal from the process. So I can bring in new ideas. I can challenge old behaviors, old workflows. And this is what actually most of the time is my success and what I'm being rewarded for.
Cool. Well, we're going to come back to that later when we're going to talk in detail about what you do. You also organized an event. I remember I was moderating at one time, weren't you? Like the night build thing.
The Nightly Build conference. Yeah. It's I think nearly 10 years ago.
Okay.
But yeah, we had it 3 times in Cologne. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, that was a good fun conference, I have to say. It was interesting because it was overnight, and yeah, but again, we can go back to this later on as well. So let's talk about some of the resources that I collected. How to steal any React component did the rounds lately. I myself didn't look into it myself too much because I'm not a React developer, but it seems like there's a security issue that people keep investigating and seeing what's going on there. Dan, have you looked more deeply into this?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little confused as to sort of what the kind of focus was in the fact that they've got the React Dev Tools. That's, I think it's called. Let me double check the proper name for it, but I think it's just called React Dev Tools, where effectively, yeah, you can already get this kind of view. So where you can kind of go down the tree and just sort of target different things that you're after. So I wasn't quite sure on kind of what the thing was that they were trying to show that was sort of doing more than that. I don't know if
in this article, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about like when you go to the DevTools, you can go into details of a component. But what they're doing here is they are using the DevTools to recreate the entire code of the component. Okay. So, for example, if I have a special button type, an uploader or stuff like that, I can recreate it. If I just like that uploader from that site and it's built in React, I can rebuild it or let it rebuild actually, because they're using AI combined with the DevTools protocol to rebuild the entire component. And this is kind of a big thing because until now, we thought that React is closed. Like it renders something, and of course you could steal the rendered code, but in this case, you get the source of it. And you can recreate by just stealing information. Overall, I'm not sure if this is a big thing or not, because yeah, if we would use web standards, it was always a thing.
Yeah, I mean, but that was the promise of components, wasn't it? That basically it will be taken away from the end user, and they won't be able to take a look into it. Like, I mean, it was always like, you probably saw that as an old school freelancer as well. Like that, every time you build a website and then somebody said like, how can I stop people from right clicking and looking at the source code, and how can I stop people from downloading my images? And you're like, you
prevent the
can't.
context menu clicking.
Yeah.
And it was never a security thing. It's just like, it was just bizarre that people wanted to have the distribution, but they didn't want to have like the inside. So I
just
guess
to be
that's
clear about this one, I don't think this is a vulnerability or anything like that. It's more like someone clever found a way to get into information that wasn't thought for this. But actually, it's we want debuggability, we want dev tools, so this is the way how to solve it. And if people abuse it, that's the way of life, I think.
Well, it's a bit like console log when people are doing like self-XSS things and say like, oh, copy this paste into the console and then you get access to YouTube for free. And people wonder why there's a Bitcoin miner running in the background after that. So it's, yeah, it comes with like power and responsibility kind of thing. Another announcement that I found interesting, that Google will now release Android source code twice a year. Not that many impact on the end users, but it feels bad because it's like, I like open source to keep releasing things. But like gatekeeping and just throwing it out twice a year feels a bit like, okay, here's something that we did and hopefully the community will help us fix bugs, but not like have an ongoing process and ask for innovation kind of thing or ask for contribution. I mean, compared to iOS, it's still more open, but it is interesting how all these big open source projects started in the last few years, releasing less and less and being a lot less open, and feeling more like the source available rather than open source. But yeah, only twice a year. I don't know if that actually is enough. But then again, I mean, Android has always been so fragmented. It's always been interesting. I always use Google phones, and my Android was always amazing. And then I got a Samsung phone in my hand or an HTC phone, and I'm like, oh my God, what is this? It feels like a Windows 95 distribution with like IE when you're already on Chromium. And but yeah. Now the source is only twice a year. Gatekeeping, I'm not a fan, but let's see why they did that. Now the big one that was doing the rounds was of course this, where Tailwind had to get rid of 75% of their engineers because they can't make any money with Tailwind. Because their business model idea was like, we make Tailwind, you go to the documentation, you see ads, and we make money. And now every AI bot scrapes the documentation and gives people the answer directly in their code environment or in their chat system. So nobody goes to the page, no ads are being shown. So basically, they don't make any money anymore. I find it very fascinating that this did the rounds in every news outlet there. That like the cool thing that everybody Tailwind, not Winter, the Tailwind, the cool library that everybody uses, has to get rid of 75% of their people, which was 3 people. Let's face it, like this is basically like it's a great way of writing headlines is saying percentages, you know, like, oh, we had like 400% increase in viewers this month, and that was like 12 people watched it instead of 3. So like it was only 3 people, but it shows that the idea of saying open source means showing ads around the documentation or the landing page, that has been out of the window for decades, I think. But now it's even worse.
Yeah, but I think it's not only showing ads. They had also that package of Tailwind UI, which they sold, which is a UI library of pre-packaged components using Tailwind. And see like a component system, a templating, theming thing. It was quite useful for beginners or people who didn't want to spend a lot of time building standard components. They could just buy the package. But one of the arguments is that by using Tailwind just within the AI inside Cursor or stuff like that, you never go to the website or documentation anymore. So you don't see that they offer this UI package at all. And of course, that revenue is also down now. So I kind of see two things. The ads thing, you're totally right. This is outdated, but it still worked for them, it seems. And the other thing is, how would you sell anything if your open source solution is just used by a translation layer, in this case, the AI?
Yeah, that begs the question: is a JavaScript library or is a component library even a product that anybody can sustainably make money with as a freelancer or as a single person, or do we need companies to release these things and support those things and basically see them as a loss leader? So that's the bit. Like, I mean, React has always been free because it gave Meta access to thousands and thousands of developers. So that was why React was free. Chrome was actually free and open source because it showed ads. Like that, there was never from the goodness of their heart. Like, it was always a matter of like accessing developers and getting people into the company that way, or getting them to use the products that the company does, and to a degree making them dependent on the company as well. And I mean, in Tailwind's case is interesting because, like, I mean, if you need the documentation for something like Tailwind, whereas its message was we make CSS much easier, and CSS is so complex nobody's going to understand it, then it feels weird that you're relying on a documentation to understand the bit. I mean, Dan, you looked into Tailwind a bit, and you got converted, right? You became a follower.
Yeah, I quite
now.
like it. Yeah, I mean, I've always quite liked it, mainly for just sort of speed. I mean, I know it's got its definitely got its drawbacks. You know, I've definitely seen issues around, you know, once you hit a certain scale, it's going to be difficult to maintain. But I do like it. But I think that it was just when you were speaking then, I thought, in a way, LLMs they're not just killing this whole idea of the component library. They're actually kind of meaning that we potentially use components from multiple libraries and don't even know it. And what I mean is, there'll be a huge number of people that are going to be using Tailwind, maybe without knowing it, vibe coding, or just importing in the package and then grabbing the free ones that you can find that are out there. There's a tailwindcomponents.com, I think it is. It's just the free version that's unofficial, you know, of their own kind of official library. Now, you could get all of that really without even leaving the LLM, right? You could just do it in Cursor and say, give me a pricing table. And I've done that a few times where I've gone just to mock something up, like, give me a pricing table, give me one of these, give me one of these, all Tailwind ones. And they've actually come back with the exact copy of the component that's on tailwindcomponents.com. So it's kind of meaning people are probably using the component library without even knowing it, because they've just said, give me a component. And so the kind of Tailwindness becomes like less relevant. It's just, I want a component, and if I'm not really touching the code, then does it matter if I'm using Tailwind or CSS? To me, the kind of vibe coder, and there'll be a huge number of those people that are accounting for the people that maybe would have gone and looked at the docs, because I would say the Tailwind docs are probably more readable than almost any others I've ever come across. They're just so plain English. So I feel like maybe there's that even some of the vibe coders that may have looked at the docs would have now not needed to. So yeah, I don't see how it can sustain itself over time.
I think the main point why it got into public here is the same old discussion about how to make free open source somehow sustainable.
Yeah, interestingly enough, we had a person here on the show before from Penpot, the company that's basically a collaborative design tool in the browser. And I love how they turned that on their head. And we have to follow up with him to basically see how it worked out so far. What they do is, like, normally the idea is you release the open source version, and then you have an enterprise version with more features or support or documentation. And with Penpot, they turned it around and said, like, what they realized that a lot of enterprise companies love to use open source things, but they don't want to allow their engineers to do everything with it. So they want to limit them to actually get to only use parts of the whole product. So what PenPod does is releases the things open source. And if you want to limit the functionality for your own engineers, you have to pay for that. So it's basically, I love this idea, like, and I really hope that it's a huge success for them. So we're going to invite them again and bring them in, because the idea of like, yeah, how do you make money with something free? I mean, we can come back to that later. When I was a freelancer, my parents were like, "So that's like being unemployed, right? You're not, no, you're not good enough for anybody to hire you." So they feel like creating free stuff means like, okay, you're not doing anything useful. But yeah, it feels it's a growth moment, I think, as well. Like as soon as something becomes so used, so sorted. Remember, jQuery was similar like that as well. jQuery plugins became a thing, and then jQuery plugins got shut down one day after another because the maintainer didn't want to do it anymore, and thousands of things got up there, got basically outdated. It's interesting with vibe coding because the code's gone away. So basically, you write from scratch every single time. The bigger problem, I think, with when you said like if you never look at the documentation, you probably use an outdated version of Tailwind that actually turns out to have like security issues, performance issues. So keeping that thing up to date is another very interesting one. But yeah, this did the rounds, and it's an interesting concept of like how do you make money with free stuff, and how do you work with like growth, and yeah, it's going to be a tricky one. Maybe we get somebody from them involved. One of the laid off people should have some time on their hands now, right?
I'd recommend, by the way, read the comments if you get a chance, because that thread is,
Yeah.
it's pretty heated at times, but it's interesting.
Okay. So big one, of course, in Germany especially, and in Europe, is like right now, for some reason, people are not too happy to be completely dependent on U.S. technologies and U.S. government controlled things. There's a Digital Independence Day every first Sunday of the month in Germany, where people meet each other and tell how to get rid of X, how to get rid of AWS, how to get rid of these things, how to set up your own NAS to host your own images. And here's a guide to actually get started, how to actually move from a dependency to your stuff somewhere else, going from email, from Gmail to Proton Mail, and so on and so forth. It, I mean, I understand it, but it's really hard to get people to move things because it's convenience, right? I mean, I have about 16 years of data at Gmail, and it is useful, but it's of course I understand the concept, but I wonder how many people will go for that. How about you, Anselm? Do you try to get less dependent on the US things, or what do you try to do?
I'm pretty independent of US tech, I would say. Pretty. Maybe 50% or something. No, but I always was conservative here. I dropped WhatsApp, I think, over 10 years ago, for example, switched to Signal. It's kind of hard because your contacts aren't there 10 years ago. Nowadays, it's a little bit better. I also tried the Switzerland app. Not sure, is it Wire or something like that? It was even less people there. So it's kind of hard. For email, I was always on a German hosting company with my emails. So that's not a thing for me. I never paid myself for Office 365 or stuff like that. So I had LibreOffice, OpenOffice, stuff like that. And for cloud, it depends. I have some knowledge with Nextcloud and stuff like that. So for some small organizations, I always recommend to use something like hosted Nextcloud in Germany, because it's just often easier and cheaper for people to have that suite in Germany hosted, and you could just replace or ask a German support hotline here. So that's the main reason. For a couple of things, it's super easy. For other things, it's not. Talking about Signal, it's a US company. It's US hosted on AWS. You won't get out of that easily. And for work-related stuff, it's a whole different story.
Yeah, because companies are ones that basically have been drinking the Kool-Aid of companies for years. And like, I mean, the idea of saying like we are on a cloud where people from America would get an American server rather than going to Germany and have that latency is of course an interesting one. But yeah, it turns out that like with HTTPS2 and these kind of things that we and concurrent connections nowadays, these things have become much faster and much more less of an issue than they were before.
Yeah, and it's not the problem anymore because when we talk about getting off US tech, we actually mean getting off AWS. But using AWS means for a German service provider, we're using AWS here in Germany, in Frankfurt. So that's not a thing that I send my data to the US, but it's actually owned by the same company that is a US entity. So it's kind of difficult to find a cloud that works worldwide and is not by a US tech company. But that would mean getting off the company. So yeah.
There's an
Kind of a
interesting one
challenge,
as well.
but I would say just start somewhere, change what you can, and be pragmatic here.
So there's also an idea, the ARES, Europe Open Digital Initiative ecosystem. So they're doing a strategy about like how to make basically a European cloud, and that's a part of a European Union offering that asks for feedback right now. I found that in Bruce Lawson's links of the week. So basically, because he's the one that actually went to European Commission about Apple. So he's more into that. So the European Commission is on the case. So make like a cloud that's independent. So let's hopefully the EU grid. So let's see what's coming out of that one. And there's also German initiatives, French initiatives, Spanish initiatives. England probably has their own stuff now as well, where they make things. I don't know.
I know what we're doing. Yeah. Yeah, less said
Cool.
about us, the better.
Okay, let's talk about some geek stuff. Here is something that I found the other day, which I found fascinating, which is from the 13th century. There is a way to actually show the numbers from 1 to 999 as a single character. So it's the Cistercian numerals. So basically, you have one character and you start adding different things to it. And then you get like 1, that's the 2, that's the 3, that's the 4, and so on and so forth. So I'm like, this is pretty amazing. So I was wondering what I could do with that. And of course, I started actually playing with it. And then, okay, so that's the numbers, that's the explanation for it. And then I created a Cistercian number character generator. So you can generate the numbers now. You can generate it as Canvas or as SVG. You can click on it and you can get it as a PNG, or you can click on it and get it as an SVG. And then you actually can also just change the numbers to whatever, and it will always create the new characters for you. This is all based on, of course, I could have just done the generator, but because I'm a nerd, I actually did a JavaScript function to do that. So, and to show the demo, I have a Cistercian clock as well. So you can read it in those figures if you want. I think 1 or 2 people on the planet might be able to do that because there's not many 13th century monks left. But as people are nerds, Vasilis, I can't remember his full name now, but he was actually speaker at Beyond Tellerrand as well. He just made that version out of it, basically using my JavaScript to show that you can also do a clock with one number. So he adds the hours, minutes, and seconds together and shows that number instead of just only the first 60. So he created that one from that library as well. And then I basically, how do I do that? So there's a 2 Cistercian number, which is a node object that creates an SVG file, or you have the full-on JavaScript version that allows you to also run the configuration and override it and do different numbers and these kind of things. And the interesting bit was like, I just had that image. I found it on Imager of these letters, and I'm like, this is really cool. So let's do something with that, and let's use that cool magical thing called AI and actually do something with it. So I gave Copilot the image and said like, okay, turn this into SVGs, and it turned it into utter garbage. It was just basically completely wrong. And it basically, but confidently, it was just basically saying like, here you go, yeah, here's the fast, and like this is not even remotely what it's supposed to be. But then I got tired of it, and I basically took a look at the horrible JPEG that I had, and put a grid and said like, okay, so let's make points at 10, 10, at 0, 30, 10, 50, 10, and so on and so forth, and then actually define the points that are possible to come up with all these glyphs. And then I defined all the glyphs saying like connect point 1 to 13, connect point 1 to 5, and so on and so forth. And basically, so I said offline in a cafe. So I basically did that by hand. And then all of the rest was a bit of JavaScript to make these things happen and put them together. I love that you find stuff like that, and then you can basically just write a bit of JavaScript and nobody can stop you from doing it, and that people are using it right now. I think my favorite bit of feedback of that one was a person on Blue Sky that said, "Oh, did you see this website? That actually there was a website from 2002, like one of those 5,000 ads on it, scrolling back and down and saying like calculating 10 seconds and then showing you the glyph after that." And I'm like, okay, so no, I didn't, because I don't do research. I just basically start coding myself, it seems. Yeah, and then he said, like, I have this anvil in my house that had these glyphs on the side, and I was wondering if it was those. That's why I looked at that website. And I was just like, who has an anvil lying around like that? This basically has some runes on it that if you might read them out, it brings up Satan, or I don't know. Like, that was just wonderful that you can go down that deep hole of geekiness there. But it was a lot of fun to build these things, and I love that we have those. So I thought about it as a Cope 100 challenge, but then I just did it myself. So do you find yourself having time for this as well? But as a freelancer, you probably want to get paid for your time, right?
I do free stuff. I worked on open source stuff, and yeah, built a lot of libraries as well. I'm not that kind of geek when it comes to visual things and historical stuff, but I totally understand why you did that, and it's super interesting. And I really love that people get creative based on your idea. Like, you pushed something and you get feedback from others. Some people make a colored version or improved things, and this is the whole spirit of open source movement in front-end development. It was always like someone pushes something and you iterate over it, or multiple people do. So it's great, yeah. And it's fun. Of course interesting that such things exist or existed.
Yeah. And it's also utterly useless, so that's the good thing about it, and unreadable. So yeah, it's always fun when you get like science fiction movies. It's always fun when you get science fiction movies and you basically people have Morse code and they're like, oh, I know Morse code, and everybody remembers immediately that they know Morse code, and you're like, when I was 12, I probably looked into Morse code and I could understand a bit of it, but like, yeah, I completely forgot about it. Now, this came from our CEO from SEAT, Ahmetovic, and it's bonkers. It's basically this is Emo OS, and Emo, not Emo, Emu, not Emo, and it's basically a Windows 95, Windows 98, or Windows ME for some reason in your browser, and it's all kind of games that you can play on this old machine in the browser. What I don't understand is that they have all the Flappy Bird and Cut the Rope in there, because they were never on Windows 95. They were mobile phone games, but I guess because they're small and they're easy to render. But you can do things like Quake, you can play Command and Conquer, you can basically play Tomb Raider, and it's basically doing it in the browser. So it's using WebAssembly to run a virtual machine, and under development. Okay. And then it actually creates the thing for you, and it's just amazing that you can do this stuff. And it's basically we have a procrastination corner in our Dev Digest every Friday, and that's basically procrastination on top. So basically, if you share this in the office, your HR people will start hating you because everybody does random things. But then you were pointing out that some of the menus are not the way they should be, right?
Yeah, I feel like really unfair that, I look at this and it's amazing, but I was like, hang on, that's not how the Windows 95 menu looks at all. Yeah, I mean, I also, my first question to you, Chris, was like, how do they actually do this? And I know you said about it being sort of WebAssembly, because at first I was like, hang on a minute, is this somebody who's just vibe coded tiny little, games within a kind of platform? But yeah, I love it. I mean, we love anything nostalgic on this show, and this is just so well executed. But dangerous, because I know that I could play Tomb Raider for the rest of my life just for the nostalgia there. if it would work anyway.
Yeah, some people build Tailwind for open source in their free time, and some people just build Windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cistercian monks or whatever they're called as well. Yeah, we've got all sorts.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at some tips and tricks bits, some tools. It turns out that JavaScript 4 off loops, which every tutorial always told you never to use because they're really, really, really slow, are actually fast these days in V8. And that's always a very interesting one because when I worked on JavaScript engines, we do so much under the hood to optimize code. Like when you do the magic mistake of like doing a for loop and you read the array length on every iteration, which is a really bad idea because the array length is not changing. It's not a DOM node that is actually live or anything like that. We actually analyze those for loops in JavaScript and cache the thing for you so that the for loops without caching the array length were as fast as the other ones. And V8 is full of these little tricks and things. And it's interesting to see that we now somebody's take a look at that and analyzing it. But yeah, for off loop actually works as fast as the others in V8, unless you use another engine, which you sometimes do as well, don't know, outside Node or something. But it's interesting that these things are there. I don't know if the both of you know about that coding tutorial by Worry Dream that was talking about like how we should teach coding completely differently, where it's input and output is the same thing. And he explained that a for loop is such a very, very complex thing for people to think about, whereas like a while loop makes so much more sense because it's so much more human. Because for has like has an iterator in it, there's two variables in it, whereas a while has one thing that goes from something to nothing.
Yeah.
And I found that interesting to see. Now, one thing also that I was excited about, but probably Dan, you can tell us more about, is this one line of a Chrome Canary 1.4.5 right now. So that's probably now the current version, I think. That's basically text grow per line scale. And that's just really cool, I have to say.
Yeah, really useful as well. I mean, we looked at one of the websites we brought it up recently, Chris. I know you know the URL. I think it's a Norwegian. I hope I'm getting the right country there. A Norwegian publisher.
Yeah.
And it kind of does this like, yeah. And the more you look at that, the more you think, okay, that could actually be quite a lot of work because they do per line, kind of trying to make the text kind of fill. And this is just a really useful, kind of way of doing it, I suppose. I think this kind of stuff. I mean, we've talked before, Chris, about everyone trying to kind of recreate print publishing on the web rather than seeing it as something different and its own kind of medium. But I like having the options, right? Because this is a very newspaper-looking kind of solution, but also quite nice and simple. Just the text grow, so it's a one-liner per line scale. But I think it's nice to have the option, even if I don't know if I would use it that often, though. Or all the time. I don't know yet. I'd have to sort of go, well, is there a big upside or downside to doing this?
Well, it feels also like, what's the performance of it? Like, there's a lot of repainting, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I mean, where do like variable fonts go into that as well? Because that was always the other thing that people started using to actually have the font sizing in the font itself, in the font file on a binary level, rather than the JavaScript or engine and the CSS rendering engine having to do it. But I think it's just incredible. And next week we're going to have a CSS person on the show as well. Just how much CSS can do these days. And I find myself having to force myself to look into new features that I completely forgot about, rather than just like, I'm going to put this fix in there that made it work in Internet Explorer 5, and that's going to be amazing. But it's really kind of tricky to keep up with it to a degree. But something like that looks magical and hopefully is. But then I see Canary 1.5.4 and it's Canary is like, it's great for the influencers out there, but I've never when I worked on Edge, I've never seen the download numbers go beyond the hundreds. And
I think this is for bringing ideas outside, showing it in some blog article here. And I think the main advantage here is that it's one property, really, really simple values that are possible here to create this effect. I mean, we have the tools to create this effect already in the browsers, but we need to use the font size, we need clamping and stuff like that, like the complex functions in CSS to achieve this right now. Whereas this one is a one-liner that everyone can remember. So it would be great to have these tiny little helpers available, even if we're just using it in one of 100 projects or so. I really like the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite impressive what CSS can do, but yeah, it's also, it feels like sometimes it takes ages for it to become mainstream. But now that we have fewer browsers, it's sadly enough we have fewer browsers, but it's actually much faster that things become like available. And I mean, now with Jake Archibald being at Firefox, there's so much more information about Firefox out than before. Like he does a lot of social media outreach kind of thing. And yeah, the baseline work that these people publish these things together is really, really good as well. So yeah, it's fascinating to see. But hopefully people like me actually will never get bored of looking things up and hoping that it will be available. But you always have to jump over your own shadow and say like, it's going to be just Cattery. Like I'm going to wait for a few months before I do it. But it's it also makes CSS much more complex. I mean, I had a discussion with somebody on LinkedIn that was all like, oh yeah, Tailwind was basically making CSS easy for people because people hate CSS because it's not programming and it's like a language that nobody understands. And you're like, it's the biggest pain point for developers. And you're like, yeah, it is. But then again, I always say like, if you don't like it or you don't want to understand it, then don't pretend that you're the expert, but partner with somebody who does it. That actually makes a lot more sense than just saying like, it's crap because I don't get it. Now, talking about times when you want to actually not work, this is great. This is a Cloudflare error page generator, where basically if you have a product and you cannot get it done, you can actually just create the thing, and then you can just basically show that in your iframe and tell the company like, oh, it's actually Cloudflare's problem, so it's not ours. So this is a great way to actually use the Cloudflare outage to your own advantage.
Has anyone built a browser extension for this so that the URL is correct still?
Oh, that might be an interesting thing to do. Like, let's take a look at that. I mean, you can also just put it in an iframe, then the URL will stay the same.
Yeah,
but you need to inject it then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, browser extension is the next step then. But I love that somebody put this thing in there and just basically.
If someone remembers.
I love bookmarklets. They're really much more. They're less powerful than extensions, but also less dangerous than extensions. Because extensions to me are
very
the main
easy
thing.
to write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about this before here. I mean, I showed a few bookmarklets that were actually there, or favelets as people call them, because I mean, Firefox was the last browser to call it bookmarks.
Oh, okay.
You know, like Netscape actually, and then after that, it was always called favorites in all the other browsers. So that's a weird one. Cool. So, which brings us to our topic, freelancing in an AI world. I have two things that actually that are going into this, which is before we go into the detail of this one. Adam Argyle again has this great thing where it's like, okay, four CSS features that everybody needs to know in 2026. Container scroll state, snapped, and scrollable. And I'm like, this is all cool shit, but I've never looked into it. And it feels weird to get these like things you need to know in 2026. And I'm like, okay, which product do you use it in? But I love that, of course, people publish that stuff, and Adam is incredible at doing that. But it feels like it's really hard to keep up to date with what's happening in CSS. And do you feel like, as somebody who's a freelancer that people pay to actually get newer stuff, do you normally keep up to date and get asked by people what is possible, or do they just want you to create things that work?
That's a good question. It fully depends on the project and the company and what type of work I'm doing here at the client. From time to time, I need to go into these new edge cases, applying all the new features, stuff like that. Most of the time, it's more about finding the right and the best solution for a problem. And this includes like old school CSS, but sometimes modern CSS. I just remember 3 years ago, so it's actually 2023 it was. I was in a project as front-end developers with 4 colleagues, and we built an application in React and how you do this these days. And we had a UI library. I think it was MUI or stuff like that. And we had to build on the footer of a page or on the end of the body a fixed line or a shape with 3-step of colors. And people were not able to not use an image for that. It was like, imagine blue, green, black, 30% for each of that. And I'm like, well, why don't we use a step gradient here in CSS? And people were totally amazed that this is possible. So it shows that CSS already is so complex that people may know the newest stuff, the shiny stuff, because they read a blog post about it, but they don't know how to do the basic stuff. And when I'm in a project where we still write actual CSS, which is becoming rare these days, but every time I find so many things that you could optimize easily. And there are some parts that make it easier today. For example, that you can nest natively selectors in CSS, or for example, like gradient options, scrolling stuff, like all the basic settings that we get today that weren't there before. And this is great. Or things like margin inline or inset values instead of stating 4 lines of stuff, especially for international sites. That's really, really helpful. That's something that most of the people don't know, or they are unsure how to use it. So a lot of people also have read the articles, but they never tried or cared to look up the specification, so how to actually use it. And they like to have an expert saying, yes, this is how you use it. And then they are happy that I'm the one who does it. So it fully depends on the project. Most of the projects today are Tailwind, Next.js, and using that ecosystem. But I still like to go outside sometimes and write custom code and optimize stuff, because it's just sometimes Tailwind is not the best idea. It's just the most common thing that everyone can learn. And as you said, Chris, if people say CSS is becoming too complex, I don't understand it, it's not logical, I always understand it like that. If you have full stack developers, it's hard for them, because this is the language that is not like every other programming language. And backend engineers often do front end as well these days. And that's when it becomes a problem. They expect it to be the same, to be understandable and logical, and CSS is not. So that's when Tailwind CSS becomes useful, because they can apply the logical part and they can build a full stack application, even though they don't know the exact thing what they're doing. Whereas if you choose to be a front-end developer, you choose the JavaScript ecosystem inside of a browser, which is not entirely logical and depends on a lot of factors. And this is what I don't understand. People are trying to get so much into TypeScript, for example, because it's typed and it's strict. And what they don't get anymore often is that we are still transpiling it in the end, and we are trying to use it in the browser, and the browser still has all the things that it has with the networking and loading behavior and weird stuff that the rendering engine has to do. So for me, this is kind of, I choose to be a front-end developer inside that ecosystem. So I have to learn CSS as it is, and I have to understand how network in a browser works, and how and what can fail in JavaScript, for example. If I understand that, that's great, because you're a great front-end developer. If you're not, you're more like a full stack or backend developer, which is totally fine, but just admit what you want to do, and then you're going to be great at what you are.
And I mean, sometimes it's finding the right solution, like a stepped gradient there, rather than just like finding 50 different libraries to put in to solve that problem, which like a code editor or a vibe coding environment would do, because probably. I remember the classic was on Stack Overflow, where it's like any question that you had, like, was like, just use this and that library instead, and not like, here's the spec, here's the thing. Gradients are a great example. I mean, I'm still using gradient editors because I read the spec, I tried to understand it, and I failed completely at doing it. And there is no gradient editor in developer tools, sadly enough. There's editors for drop shadows, there's editors for animation, but not for gradients. And it feels like a very complex thing to get my head around. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found interesting was this post about somebody where it said like the grief when AI writes most of the code, where it's like, yeah, I mean, how do we, as a contractor or as a freelancer, you often basically get like, okay, you get paid for doing the work that you do. So, and if you generate a lot of code from, either take it from a library or take it from get it generated with an LLM, it feels like you've not worked. I don't feel any. I don't feel much pleasure from it, and I don't feel much gratification from doing it, because it feels like anybody could have done it with three presses of a button. Whereas like writing the thing yourself gives you a lot more like agency in it. How do we? Do you think this is something we have to get over if it comes to freelancing, because you just deliver the code and run?
I mean, you're partly right, especially when it goes to the timing part. And I read another post today, which is mentioning that our hourly rate is not working anymore when we generate stuff with LLMs. For example, I can really write a lot of code in 2 to 3 hours because I didn't write it myself. I just told someone else, the LLM or the agents, to write stuff for me. And this, of course, is much faster. And the result may be the same because it's all working, and it's actually sometimes it's really working good and fine. So the problem here is, if I'm billing hourly, I can choose to be on the same rate, and I just get less money because there is not as much to do for me. I could double my rate. No one would pay that. Also understandable, but it shows the problem that by just adding LLMs to generate code, we are facing a lot of organizational problems, because we just do it, but we don't know the implications and what it means to us. And the other part is joy of working. So when you say, I can press some buttons and I don't enjoy writing code or let code be written by an LLM anymore, I can also refer to that. For me, it's mostly that this is super limited when it comes to the technology stack. So most of the things where it works really good is Next.js with Tailwind, for example, and also having a Node.js TypeScript backend behind it. This is an environment where you can quickly generate a lot of code by using agents, and it works good. But this is not my preferred stack, to be honest. I really like custom stacks, writing real CSS, writing normal TypeScript or JavaScript. I don't want to be tied to a specific framework. That's not where I get joy. But what I also realized over the past year is, by using Cursor, to help me write code. I'm actually much faster if I have a plan for it. And that means I, as a freelancer, I still have a totally different core competence. My expertise is not to write the best code necessarily and write the most efficient JavaScript function or something like that, but it's to have a look at the task or project and find the best way to provide value for the customer. So that means I'm really taking care of writing the specifications correctly to see how does it integrate into the company, how does it provide the best value for the customer. And this is how I excel at also writing the prompt for the LLM. Because if you just say something that is not really specified, you won't get a great result from the LLM. It just does whatever they think is best, but it's not necessarily. So you still need to find your niche where you're best at. And if this is writing specifications and outlining what the product should look like and what it should do, then you're totally fine with letting you assist by LLMs. If you're not,
do you feel that there's a
yeah?
Do you feel that there's a competition? Like, did you have customers that used to hire you and basically said like, "Oh, we're going to use the AI thing instead"? Do you see AI agents as a competitor for you as a freelancer?
Yes, definitely, because most of the people don't know what to hire a freelancer for. We had it in the beginning that companies often just need more resources. They don't know what for or what exactly should be done. They just hear, oh, we are we don't have enough people here, so let's add some resources. And by default, you would just hire an agency or contractors, and they do the task that you specified. And this is the case where you can easily replace the contractors by an LLM, because that works. If you have a predefined task, just ask the LLM. It will do the same result, or even better, because it integrates into your code. But if you hire a freelancer who sees or who tries to identify the problems and thinks about the product, then it's a different thing. And I have the problem that most of the companies don't realize that anymore, that freelancers are not for just doing work that you specified, but they have completely different mindsets or views because they worked on dozens of different companies and projects. So they can help you get the best experience into your company. And for example, when I'm going into a team, I always coach them with my knowledge, because I don't want to go into a team, write a solution, and leave them alone with my solution that they don't understand anymore when I left. I want them to understand how I think. I want them to learn something from my presence. And this is when I enjoy work, when I see that the team evolves because and while I'm there. And I think that is the benefit of hiring a freelancer. But of course, as LLM can or suggests that it can solve a lot of these problems for you, it seems that you could replace freelancers with LLMs. And I think we have to differentiate here, because as always, out there are freelancers who are just doing some work and they're not doing great. And there are freelancers who really, really care and have competency on project management, for example, and organizing and specifying work. And this is a whole different story then. So I'm very
It feels
curious.
more like a consultant expert that you hire in rather than somebody to do the job.
True. And what I am is more complex. I am a consultant who can code and who can assist the team or help the management. I'm kind of in between, because what I've seen also is you hire a project manager, you hire a scrum master, you hire product owners, and you hire developers. They were different roles. it almost never worked as expected because the different roles had no idea what the others were doing. But if I am a developer and I can tell other developers from the team why it's important to specify a product or to specify a workflow, what quality we want to deliver and stuff like that, then it's easy because I can lead by example by just saying, here's my code, here's my issue that was on production, and this is how I could fix it by having a different workflow, for example, or having different standards applied. And this is what matters most, that leading by example inside of a team, and you are allowed to do all that in the company that hired you.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that especially I think there's a good opportunity right now as a consulting freelancer to help companies embrace AI as well, rather than like replace you with AI. So or fix vibe code that they actually managed to fail. That one that there's a joke on LinkedIn that it actually is like a senior vibe code fixer is a job title now. But it's an interesting it's interesting that people. Freelancing always feels like we have to get somebody in who does the job because it's not fast enough. And as you said, the padding the project up front with like getting people in, it's like the old mistake of like, yeah, 9 women can make a baby in 1 month. Like, no, that's just putting more people on the project doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more effective and faster. But now you can have like 9 agents and run those for an hour, and that feels much cheaper than getting a freelancer in and having to sign the contracts and these kind of things. But it's again selling your worth and going to the customer and selling like what you can do for them. And I think that's great advice also for people inside the company when companies ask you like, why should I not replace you with an agent that codes the same things? And if it's really that your company only uses Next.js and React components to put together, then probably, yeah, you're not necessary, and you might be better off somewhere else where you get taxed and where you actually have an interesting thing to do. But it's very fascinating to see that the we just got a freelancer in is now a question of like, should we use an LLM to do that and then get a freelancer to fix it later on?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the worst choices because if you hire a freelancer or tell your internal people to use an LLM but do it properly, know how to use it, specify everything, then you don't need to fix it later on. It's as easy as that. Fixing later on is never a good idea.
Very expensive, takes about 5 times as longer as just fixing it up front and making it sure. I mean, performance, accessibility, all the bits and bobs like that you have to think about. Like it was always really annoying in enterprise where you have something and the legal compliance came at the end and you're like, okay, now we have to rewrite the whole thing because it cannot be in Europe. We cannot make this live. But nobody thought about it up front. It's interesting because you normally get around when I was on the other side, I was a staff engineer, and we always got freelancers in that would do the things that the staff engineers wouldn't do or wouldn't do as quickly because that's as you said, the freelancers that ship the code and run.
Yeah,
I think their time is over because you can easily replace them with an LLM, right?
I think so. At least it's more limited because if you're not replacing it by an LLM, you will hire them, but they will use an LLM. So they are there for a fraction of the time. So I think that's the main problem, that overall we're getting faster in shipping things and writing code. And this means we have a crowded space of people who work in web development, but we don't need all the time that is available anymore. Actual development, I mean here, like writing code. So you can excel by adding more value around the code. For example, planning the project, writing specifications, setting up test environments for this, or QA stuff. There's a lot of things that we can still optimize. It's more the architectural work that is still missing people and resources and knowledge. So I think we are going to see a shift in what people do. And in this case, I'm not making a difference between employees and freelancers here, because I think it affects all of them. Because the just plain writing of code will be less and less. It will be assisted coding, therefore faster, and it will be less because we are focused on one environment, whether it's Next.js or any other framework, it doesn't matter, but it's limited to a set of tools and more faster in this case. Yeah, one more thing that I find interesting is I see a lot of companies hiring people or trying to hire people here. Open positions, they try to find people, they are overcrowded with applications and they don't know how to manage it. And they search sometimes for half a year to find an applicant. Or sometimes they don't find or internally rehire and stuff like that. But why don't you fill up that space in the interim with a freelancer? You would instantly get someone who works on the things that you need to work on. And once you found the right applicant, you can also profit there because someone worked on this and they can do the introduction and hands-on transferring the work, and you will be much faster and not waiting half a year to start with the work that you planned for. And this is something that I think is often overseen out there, that you can fill up that idle time easily by hiring that contractors or freelancers.
I guess a lot of it is like red tape and bureaucracy, because normally the freelancer salaries are coming from a different pot than the people working in the company and from a different department as well.
You could easily free up time by simplifying your company workflows everywhere. Yes, of course, you're right, but I think there's so much wasted time in there. This shouldn't be the problem. And I also think the hardest things were like 1 week of onboarding by the customer. I think that's a lot for me. But still, if it just takes 1 week, but you search for 4 months or 5 months to find someone, it's still so much gain that you have by hiring someone interim.
Yeah, that's always what I said people about open sourcing your stuff as well, because you would have people on the outside already knowing your work, and they can hit the ground running as soon as you hire them because they already worked with it. But yeah, that's a matter
they
of
are
like
free
people.
QA.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, cool. So we're already over, but I don't mind. This was interesting. This was really good. So let's play the last thing that we haven't done that I skipped over later, and I put effort in. So let's do that. So let's play the game that we should build something cool with that to make it look better. Let's play Fake or News. So these are headlines that I collected or I made up. So you have to tell me if they're real or not. So let's get started. A rare look inside the durability lab where Apple tortures its products.
And Sam, you can guess first because I know what I think of that one.
That's a news.
Yeah, I think it's too.
Yep, it is news. There is actually a thing where they spray water on it and all kind of stuff. There was a story also that that Samsung has an ass robot, which basically is a metal butt that actually crushes mobile phones. And I was like, this is the coolest job ever. Like, what do? I run the ass robot at Samsung. Security firms warn that overly enthusiastic code assistants may introduce hard-to-trace logic drift.
Yeah, has to be real, right? That just sounds like a good advice now. I mean, yeah, hard to trace.
Anselm?
I think Chris made it up.
Yes, I did.
It's not hard to trace.
Sounds too true.
I run 6 Claude agents in parallel on my phone. No laptop, no desktop, just terminals on iOS and Cloud VM.
Oh God, I hope that's fake. I hope it is.
What is Termius again? It's again something new. Why not? If Termius exists, it's news.
It is news. It's actually somebody called it doom coding. But I mean, like, seeing that an iPhone now is basically the same price as a gaming PC used to be 5 years ago, I'm not surprised. But I'm like, yeah, this is just showing off. This is just like, okay, fair enough. CES News: startup claims that smart toaster can emotionally support owners during breakfast.
Oh, that's news, isn't it? I think that's news.
Good news.
News or fake, Anselm?
News.
Fake.
Okay, good.
In Chinese data factories, workers teach humanoid robots boring tasks.
Workers teach.
Sure.
Yeah,
they do.
train them.
Yep, it's news. It's actually folding clothes so that robots can learn how humans fold clothes. And you're like, just make a thing that folds clothes. Like, don't make a robot try to understand it. Battery suppliers report unusual demand spike as wearable manufacturers prepare spring announcements.
Battery suppliers report unusual demand spike as wearable manufacturers prepare spring announcements.
It's fake. It's not Christmas.
I'm going to say it's real.
No, it's fake. Defense unicorns valued at 1 billion in latest funding round.
Yeah. 1 billion, though, that seems quite low, actually. Everything's just getting valued ridiculously high, isn't it? I'm going to say that's fake.
Anselm?
I don't know. Take fake.
It's news. There's actually a company called Defense Unicorns that work for the US government and actually help them do security stuff.
That is
anything branding, anything naming is out of the window. I think, like, if something is called Nano Banana that rearranges images, it really doesn't matter anymore to a degree. Defense Unicorns, for Christ's sake. Major smartphone makers quietly shift onto on-device AI models amid rising cloud costs.
Smartphone makers doing it on device. Yeah. I'll say yeah, but I think the headline's only going to be about one smartphone maker. I think.
You mean Apple? No, it's not.
I don't think so.
They don't. They just switched away from it. They announced. I think it's news, and I think it's not Apple.
It's fake. But yeah, Apple does it now. Like, they have the intelligence is running on a model that's actually on device. We had somebody in the Coffee with Developers yesterday that actually talked about that. But yeah, it's I mean, again, it's like a huge, massive machine nowadays.
Yeah.
Court rules couple not married after ChatGPT written ceremony.
I think that's going to be fake because I think that they did write a ChatGPT or have a ChatGPT written ceremony, but I think it's still going to be legal. I think.
I also agree.
Nope, it's news. That actually happened in Zwolle in the Netherlands. And yeah, I talked to my partner about this, and she's like, "What? Yeah, but I don't know how harsh it is in the Netherlands if you're not married if the ceremony wasn't written by a human." And that's all the fake news we had. So yeah, it gets harder and harder to find these things because news itself is so ridiculous. I mean, defense unicorns. Yeah.
We should have asked an LLM.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I mean, like, your name is wonderful because it sounds like a monk that came up with one of those writings that I talked about, like Anselm. You can actually just get Anselm.ai, make a text box for people can chat with, and then charge them for the work that you do with them. Much like Devlin used to be, like, we get this engineer, this AI engineer. Just pretend to be an AI engineer if you don't get another contract as a freelancer. That might be the one thing to get this sorted again.
Maybe, yeah.
But AI domains are really expensive and they only run for 2 years. That's the other problem with that. Like, yeah, you always have to refresh them. Well, I mean, thanks so much, Anselm. This was great again. I hope we got some insight into your world, and I'm very happy that you found a new contract again. And after you've been complaining on LinkedIn about this, and I mean, that works. Complain in public, and people who care like me will talk to you. So that's another thing that works out. But yeah, I found the insights really interesting in terms of like that we always think as an engineer we have LLMs as a competition, but as a freelancer it really feels like another thing as well. Like these a lot of companies see like hiring a freelancer as a frivolous thing. Like, okay, we need somebody outside in that we pay extra, and we could actually pay a subscription for a year and actually do that with an LLM instead. But I mean, the old saying says, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys.
Yeah, just try it out. Try both ways. I think that's the way to go. It was a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Cool. Anything last words that you have for our audience out there? Hire me. No,
hire me. No, in all seriousness, don't get overwhelmed by LinkedIn posts saying your job is in danger, stuff like that. Your job will change. It always has been like that. Stay curious, use an LLM, see how it's helpful or how it's not helpful. Make yourself a plan, stay a little bit distant from these hyped posts, and I think you will be fine. That's my last word.
Cool.
Thank
you. How about you, Dan?
Just say don't forget people, really, because I was just thinking the whole way through this that if we had got an LLM instead of you, Anselm, we wouldn't have had the good chat. So it's nice to have a human on here. And yeah, thanks for joining us. But that's my advice. Don't forget humans. Don't forget freelancers. LLMs are nice, but not for everything.
It would be interesting to do a live show with an LLM or an AI or some generated kind of thing, like not one of those croc things because they keep undressing, but like it would be interesting to see what that would be like. But yeah, it's tricky to see what is human and what's not human. I mean, I'm getting rid of Facebook right now because I'm done with all the posts that are just obviously AI generated. And it's just a very sad thing that like the world where the geeks met is now kind of gone. So maybe Reddit is the thing to go. I don't know yet, but we'll see. And maybe I find some new stuff that monks have done in the 13th century to make myself happy. That's going to be my advice for today. If you find some random things to write some code for that nobody asked for, do it, because it's actually joy. The joy of developing to me was always not writing lines of code, but solving a problem. If a problem feels like it's not a problem at all, but to you it matters, that's also okay, cool. To learn something from that. I learned a few things writing that code. Like I battled Copilot at a few moments where it said like you should do it like this, and I'm like, no, don't do it like that. But like it's you learn by doing things and by solving problems. And if nobody sends you problems, like a freelancer always gets, come up with your own problems and solve them. And it's actually a joy to do that at times. So that's really, really cool to see. So there's lots of stuff to be out there. And Dan, you're the native English person. I was wondering about it. Is freelancing a medieval term where you hired a mercenary with a lance?
Do you know what? I've never thought about it.
From?
I'd imagine there's some, Lancing, because Lancing, it must have some origin, right? Like as in some connection with Lancing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna now talking about rabbit holes. That's going to set me off on my rabbit hole for the afternoon. I will, by the next show, I will have the answer to that question.
Excellent. So see you next Wednesday for the WeAreDevelopers Live. And thanks again, Anselm. Thanks, Dan. See you guys soon.
Thank you.